and doing the conversation. So anyway, I'm rambling here a little bit because Jackie's got a lot of stuff going on. We're supposed to be going on live.
Oops.
And
Trying.
there's a lot of stuff that's going on. So as you see in the background, so please don't hold this against us. I'm going to try to straighten out, iron out the kinks as we go along. So that's what we're trying to do. So I think right now, we have the live feed that is starting to go up as we speak, and looks like that's going on right now. So
Sorta.
yeah, we're doing this simulcasting thing, which is pretty simple for some people, but we're still trying to wrap our hands around this whole thing.
Ooh.
But anyway, we got it. While we have this, while we're getting our live stream together, and if you want to see us and see how beautiful we are, go to Facebook, Coffee Current Events and Politics page. That's where our live video is being seen at this moment. And as I'm looking at the monitor, I see. Stuff right now. I know my man card needs to be re-examined because I have my wife over here doing all the technical stuff.
We're trying,
and because hey, look, I play my role. So she's doing the technical stuff, and I'm over here trying not to have dead air. So
I don't think we have dead air. I'm hoping we don't have dead air online. I'm trying to see if we've got good audio online. I am trying to check, but I can't get, oh, that's why, because it won't post. This is what happens all the time, y'all. Hey, everybody. It's Jacqueline Lukman over here, freaking out over all of the weird new controls that I've got. And over there is...
Well, I'm over here on the Blog Talk Radio side of it, and my name is Abdul Shahid Lukman. And I'm just talking out into the universe. I don't know who's on the other side. All I know is that we're trying to simulcast this like we did last week, and a lot of stuff going on. we try to, how we prepare for this. And those of you, we welcome those of you who are joining us. We welcome you. We thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. And how this thing works for us is that, Jackie and I, we just, we just come up with stuff, and stuff that interests us, and we talk about it. I mean, we might talk about maybe 100, 200 subjects that interest us, and we have to whittle that down, because it's only an hour show.
Right.
So we have to whittle it down to what we feel is the meat and potatoes of the stuff we discuss.
Yeah, I know, and it's crazy. Thank you, Pete. Let's see, who is that in Arizona who said, "Oh, hey, Kathleen, thank you for letting us know the sound is good," because that's the thing we're trying to work out. We're trying to work out the video simulcast in two different places. We're trying to work out the sound with the external mics that make us sound decent, that make us sound like we're not sitting in a big sardine can. And we also have a guest who we are trying to make sure that we're able to get him on. So I need for you to give out the number so I can give it to our guest so he can dial in.
Okay, so well the guest call in is 929-477-3060. If you want to call us, plug in the Lukman Nation, and if you want to add your 2 cents to it, we invite you to do that, whether it's pro or con or whatever. But that's the number to connect to us. And also to our guests, who we would like to call in, your number would be 844-200-4449. And you know who you are, so we ask for you, if you're on and you hear that number, I'm going to say it again, 844-200-4449.
Okay, wait, which number is his now? 844?
200-4449.
200-4449.
And the guest calling number is 929-477-3060. We were a little thrown back. We did a show last week, and Facebook, the Facebook Gestapo. When we first started doing Blog Talk, I was like a kid in the candy store with the controls. I was going in, I was getting music. I love doing that stuff. I love pulling out music that fits some of the subject matter that we was doing. I mean, that's just what I like to do. And apparently, there's this thing called copyright infringement. People want to get paid, and all this other kind of stuff, And so, and that's okay. But what happened was, we got a message from the Facebook police saying, hey, look, you guys are doing live streams with written music and all this stuff, and and they pointed the finger at us, and and warned us not to do it. So I mean, it kind of threw a damper on what we do here, because I'm like, wow, I enjoyed that stuff, and I really wish that we could do it. So I mean, we really went into this like we do a live stream, none of the the explosions and pomp and all the fancy stuff, So it's just us, it's us and our voices and our ideas. And that's what we're bringing to you. So anyway, we got a couple things that we want to talk about. And, for those of you who don't know us, for those of you who don't, and I see that I have a button that's unbuttoned here.
Cover up my sexiness over there. Cover it up.
But anyway, so those of you who who aren't familiar with the Lukmans, we are Christian Pan-Africanists, and we see our world through the lenses of that. That has gained us some support, but it also, as we have found out, not everyone agrees with our worldview, and that's fine. I mean, we don't agree with everyone's worldview. But that's what that's what we do. And as we have stated in shows past, is that we created this forum because in our world we didn't see voices like ours,
right?
And, being and ideas like ours being expressed.
Yeah.
So but we do have this is what we're about. So that's the crash course orientation into Lukman Nation.
Right.
You know?
Right. For those of you who are new, and I think we've got most of our stuff straightened out now.
Good.
I hope you guys have let us know there's a weird slight humming going on. We'll figure that out. As long as it's not, driving you all crazy, we'll just work through it. So okay, so much stuff going on, so much stuff that has gone on, and all week long, right, hun? We've been having conversations with people about white supremacy, about racism. The show I did Thursday night was on one of my least favorite, most annoying responses that well-meaning white people give to racism, and that is it's not about race, it's about class, and it's not that class isn't an issue. It's just that it's annoying when the class issue is brought up in response to black people talking about racism. Because to tell you the truth, and you please go back and watch the Brick by Brick episode from Thursday night, for black people, even for wealthy black people, even for filthy, stinking rich black people, even for the what's his name, Bob Johnson, and his wife, I think his name is Sheila Johnson's, of the black rich world, they still have to deal with racism because they are rich in a society that was built on the principles of white supremacy and racism. So the idea that race isn't an issue that we can talk about if we're going to be serious about political activism is ridiculous, because race affects everything. And we've talked before on this show about how when people say, oh, well, race isn't real and it's a construct. Oh, that's true. But it doesn't mean that race is not used and has not been used to detrimentally affect people's lives as far as policy and legislation and practices and the institutions in this country are concerned. So, I mean, to continue to pretend that we can't talk about, that we shouldn't talk about race in the context of the issues that we face today, is to me to intentionally relegate people who continue to deal with the effects of systemic racism. It's just to continue to intentionally relegate us to the bottom status. You just want to keep us there because you don't want to talk about the problem that needs to be addressed. And the topics that we thought were pretty pressing for us this week, we think really, really highlight why race touches just about everything in this country, right? So, of course, the major issue this week, arguably, was the shooting of the Australian woman in Minneapolis,
yes.
Right? And we all should know the story by now. She was, apparently she had called 911 because to stop a sexual assault or some type of assault. She's in her pajamas. She runs out to the squad car when the police come. She's got her cell phone in her hand. She runs up to the driver's side of the police car, and somebody correct us if I have this right, if I have this wrong. And the police officer who's in the passenger seat is a Somalian. He's a Somali American. And I think there was a story last week that said that he had broken up with his wife because his wife didn't want him to join the police force. But of course, see, this is another one of those instances where how you gonna tell me that we can't talk about race, but this very incident I haven't even finished telling you the whole story, but I can point to you right there where race is an issue. Because in what other context where anybody else who was black or Latino or Native American were shot and killed by the police or shot and assaulted by the police,
right,
where the domestic problems of the police officer who was accused was ever aired? Ever, in any instance where anybody else other than the nice blonde white lady from Australia was murdered by the police. Now let me give this caveat right now, because I know somebody is going to be watching this and going, oh my God, the Lukmans, they're just a bunch of racists. We've got trolls. Some people have already said that, so some of y'all are late. That's not even an original thought. So, but it is not that we are making light of this woman's death.
Oh no, far from
it. No. It's not that we're making light of the fact that this woman was murdered by the police and people who she called for help. What we are saying is that we've been saying this since it's been happening to us. We've been saying that nobody should be murdered by the police who is unarmed and who does not pose a threat. And even if they do pose a threat, is shooting to kill really your first option? Right. Really? That's your training? That's what my tax dollars are going to train the people who, on the side of your police cruisers, is emblazoned to protect and serve. But your first response to someone who is in distress, for whatever, your first response in every situation now is to shoot to kill?
Right.
So, I'm looking at this. I saw this article from, about this police officer breaking up with his wife, or having domestic issues with his wife. And I sat there and I'm trying to think of all of the other instances where we know about the domestic problems of the police officer who murdered Philando Castile.
Right.
The police officer who murdered Tamir Rice. The police officer who murdered Rakia Boyd. The police officer who murdered Eric Garner. Trayvon Martin. Mike Brown. Amadou Diallo. I'm Sandra Bland. I know people are like, well, that's a different instance. No, it's not. We're talking about excessive and deadly force being committed by the police department, by law enforcement. But see, we've been asking these questions about law enforcement for decades.
See, this is the thing that gets me. And I, look, Kathleen Cohn said, can we talk about how racism is an instinctual issue? How it happens as a natural means of survival. There's nothing natural about racism. Let me say that right now. There is nothing natural about racism. Racism has its roots in the history of slavery. It has its roots in the dehumanization of people. There is nothing natural, instinctive about that. And we've covered that on this show. We've covered it on Brick by Brick. And when it comes to survival over resources, that's one thing. There are two separate subjects. We can compete as human groups against one another, as we have done over war and with war and over resources and everything. But that's not a racist component. Survival is not a racist component when it comes to human groups. Racism is a whole nother construct. And so when we say instinctual, that's to suggest that there's something natural in us that would see people through the lens of racism. And we know that racism is created.
Right.
It's a creative construct. So, so this is why we got to talk about this.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. People, I think, very frequently, and I again, we talked about this on Brick by Brick, the second episode in the racism series that I'm doing one more episode on, and then I'll be done with this particular topic. Probably not, but a lot of times we use terms that we don't really know the entire full meaning of. We think that racism is, many people think that racism is, I just don't like white people, or I'm white and I just don't like black people. That's not what racism is. Racism, that's prejudice. And to a certain degree, I think I do agree that most people are prejudiced of something. It doesn't have to be race, right? I think most people have some type of bias toward other people for all kinds of reasons. That, I think, might be, I won't even say that's natural. I won't even say that's instinctual. I think that's learned too. But racism is a different thing, because racism contains the the feeling or the belief that the race you belong to or the race you are identified as is superior than every other race. That's the difference between racism and prejudice or bias. So, yeah, human beings aren't instinctually racist. We learn that. Somebody has to tell us that white people are superior to black people. Nobody's born thinking that because I'm pink or, you know, because I'm Caucasian, that I'm better than this person over here who just happens to be brown. We have to be told reasons that the way we look makes us better than those people over there who look different from us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you look at, when we talk about instinctual behavior, human behavior, most people feel comfortable around those that look like them. I mean, and I don't think that that's a bad thing, per se. You know, in different parts, I mean, we have families, and our families, if you're born into a family, the family looks like you look like members of your family. More likely, you look like people in your community. You know, if you want to go way back, you know, you look like members of your tribe, you know, no matter what they are. So I think that may be instinctual, that, you know, that we feel like we have more in common with those who share, you know, our physical attributes, and in some ways our cultural attributes. That's one thing. But as you said, Jackie, to take those things and use that as a way to oppress other people, then that's not instinctual, you know. So I think that is learned behavior, as a couple of people had mentioned, and we know that through the history of the African slave trade, where all of this stuff is based. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. Jackie and I was talking about this today, and we would love to. I'm sorry, I just got a message from our guest who says that Blog Talk wouldn't allow him to log in. So I don't know what that's about.
Let's see what else we can do over here.
But we may have to have another segment with our guests where we straighten all these things out. But getting back to my point is the fact that all of this stuff is rooted in the African slave trade. And we're not talking about from the 1500s. And I mean, these roots go back even further than that. I mean, it goes back to the Roman Empire. You know, it goes back to chattel slavery, which was basically promoted by the Romans. You know, slavery, yes, always existed, but chattel slavery is definitely a product of Roman culture that that was adopted by what we know now as the West. You know, so you know, we're talking about those extreme examples. So you know, we know that that's all rooted in that, and that's the reason why we have to talk about it like we do, because you're talking about like 1,000 years of this type of indoctrination of people. We're talking about like almost 1,000 years of the oppression of one group being used solely based upon the misguided beliefs of the oppressive group, of the the oppressive group, the dominant group. So so we're talking about 1,000 years, almost 1,000 years of that type of behavior. So now we get to our day and time, and we realize that no, it's not all of this little simple stuff that we look at it to be. We look at it that it is deeply ingrained in us. I mean, so deeply ingrained in our culture, deeply ingrained in the way that the West was founded, deeply ingrained in those cultural institutions that we borrowed from the Greeks and the Romans. So all of this stuff is deeply ingrained. So much so that we keep on saying about we keep making it black and white. But so much so that when it comes to black people, that you even have other black people and people of color from different parts of the world who come to America and treat us like we don't belong here. That have they have the same misguided ideas about us that a lot of our white citizens, fellow citizens, have of us. A lot of them have of us. So I mean, so we're talking about a virus that is global. I think it's a spiritual virus. I think it's a spiritual malaise that's affecting our hearts. But it's something that is global. Anytime that my family could be here for 200-300 years, and I got someone who's just arriving off the boat from India and look at me like I don't belong here.
Right, exactly. And I know you guys have seen, I hope you guys have seen the book that we posted, what's it called, Stamped from the Beginning?
Right.
Just read the first chapter of that book. Listen, we don't come by this information we have because, we woke up with all this stuff in our head. We read information, we read and study this information from people who are much more learned than we are, and we share it with you. We incorporate it into the conversations we have about these issues that we face every day because they're important, and because this information, most people aren't going to get it. Most people aren't gonna. They wouldn't know anything about this book, Stamped from the Beginning. Most people wouldn't know anything about the Schomburg Center in New York. Most people wouldn't know anything about what was the book that the one book I read earlier this year. Oh, The Condemnation of Blackness that was written by the was written by most people. You have to have kind of a mindset to have that kind of stuff on your radar. And most people don't. Most white people, most black people. So Abdus and I read this information and we incorporate it into the conversations about these issues that we face today, like this shooting in Minneapolis, because it's related. And it's one thing for us to sit here and say, well, there's a racial aspect to what happened in Minneapolis. It's another thing entirely when we really can connect the history of racism in this country to this incident in Minneapolis, right? Because you have, just like you said, Abdus, this idea that people have treated us like we don't belong here. And our families have been here, like you said, for longer than most non-black people's families have been here. Yes, there were, like I said on the blog talk, on my Brick by Brick show, yeah, there were Africans here before the transatlantic slave trade, but the majority of us are descendants of slaves.
I mean, so much so that 1 out of 5 Africans, and this was one of the statistics that were given out of a book that I'm reading currently called Human Bondage. I can't remember the story's name. I don't have the book with me, but very, very impressive scholarly work on the Atlantic slave trade and its roots and capitalism's roots in the Atlantic slave trade, and how based on slave labor, that the global markets that it was actually the start of the global economy. When you had the colonies that was producing sugar, tobacco, all of the stuff that from the farms in the colonies, and we're being shipped to markets overseas.
Right.
I mean, we're very familiar with that, but that was rooted with the help of black African slave labor.
Yep.
So you're right, Jackie, and it's like, we talk about these things because when the conversation has always been brought up about African slavery, it's always been to the point where it was just some blip in American history.
Right.
Right. It was just some blip. It was a shameful stain on our culture, and but we got it right, and so we got it right, and and we moved on. But what we never dealt with is how deeply involved in the way that this whole country was formed, and not just this country, how Western civilization prospered, how Western civilization, how Europe started as basically a backward continent.
Right.
I mean, we talk about the Dark Ages. Well, it wasn't the Dark Ages for everybody.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It was the Dark Ages in Europe, and how the Atlantic slave trade and the exploitation of the colonies and that they founded not only brought them out of the Dark Ages by borrowing technology from everyone else, Marco Polo bringing back Chinese technology, Islam that settled in Spain, that took Spain over. Basically, when the Muslims were pushed out of Spain, They left their technology behind.
Yep.
And all of this stuff helped to move Europe out of the ignorance of their educational dark ages and move them up. And then the exploration, which gathered riches, and then the exploitation of African slaves, which through that exploitation enriched Europe.
Yep.
And you know, and enriched the West. So when we talk about these things, no, it wasn't just a blip. You know, it wasn't just a blip, and it wouldn't have been so bad if it stopped at just the exploitation. But the fact that once these institutions ended, then we have the legacy of stigmatization that affects the descendants today. So don't dare tell me that I was never a slave. Don't dare tell me that why should reparations go to you or descendants of slaves because you never were enslaved. But I am stamped
from the beginning.
From the beginning because of how those in the past felt about my ancestors, how they treated them. I had inherited the legacy of this racial caste system that we find ourselves in. Exactly.
I mean, when you now let's go back to this situation, this incident in Minneapolis, to hopefully explain what we mean. Now, a lot of people from the beginning, from like, I think people were kind of polite, right? And they were like, okay, we're not going to make any comments right now because, you know, the lady is dead. So we're not going to make any comments today, you know, the day that we found out it happened. And then like the next day people were like, okay, we're not going to say anything because, you know, the woman has lost her life. But man, by the third day that story was being reported, everybody black. Well, I shouldn't say everybody black. I have to stop generalizing. You all forgive me for that. But you know what I mean. Those of us who have been talking about racism in the criminal justice system and in regard to law enforcement, in 2-3 days after the incident, we immediately started paying attention to and calling out the differences between the way the usual suspects responded to this incident as opposed to the way they responded to all the other incidences. Even Philando Castiles, which happened in the same state. Right? So when
the same city, I believe.
Oh, was it the same city?
Minneapolis, yeah.
Wow. That's right, because it was the same police chief. That's right. It was it. So you have Philando Castile, who hadn't committed a crime, who was he was employed, he was a family man, he was engaged to his fiance, he was beloved by the kids in his school, he was licensed to carry a firearm. This man hadn't done anything wrong, and not for some reason, the Blue Lives Matter crowd still managed to find reasons to justify or excuse why he should have been shot by that police officer.
Well, I mean, and not just Blue Lives Matter. I mean, I want to back up a little bit. About when you was talking about Philando Castile, who was a model citizen. You know, he was doing what they claim we black men don't do. And that's be responsible. You know, I mean, you know, they were. You know, he was being responsible to the woman in his life. She was his fiance, not his baby's mama. He was also being a father figure to her daughter. He was someone that was employed, and you know, and I felt that how I knew that this man, and I'm not trying to be facetious here, how I knew that this man was really on the up and up was when little white kids at the school that he worked at cried when they found out that man. Now many of you might think that that's a small thing, but where we're sitting at is not a small thing. It's really not a small thing. And when he was spoken of so well by such a diverse group of people in Minneapolis, and then to have the politics of racism creep in when it came to the grand jury trial and when it came to the releasing of the videotape, when it came to the despicable way that they treated his fiance and the daughter in the aftermath.
Right.
You know, this whole thing.
Making him sit in the back of the police car. And
This whole thing of this trauma. And we talk time and time again about trauma. We talk about it. We talk about how a lot of what we see in the black community is based on the trauma of constant oppression and racial attitudes that still exist today. And how that, going back to the Romans now, I mean, bear with me, going back to the Romans, where the Romans were the first ones, at least recorded, not given any legal status to the rights of their slaves when it came to family or anything else. Now, what's the difference of not having legal status or having legal status? Let me rephrase that, and then being treated as if you don't have it. What's the difference? Okay, all right. You know, I mean, what I'm saying is that just because you tell me that something is legal doesn't mean anything.
When you're gonna criminalize me anyway.
Right. I mean, it's the behaviors that matter. If the institutions of the country that I live in, that I pay taxes in, cannot respect my legal status in my relationships and the way that I am as a citizen, then what's the point of having it written down on paper that this is legal?
Right.
And throughout this whole thing, it was, I mean, he was disrespected not only during the traffic stop, but he was disrespected. His family was disrespected.
Right.
So to move this further along is that when the Australian lady, and I'm sorry I don't have her name at the tip of my head, but
Justine Damon.
Justine Damon, and I want to say her name because she did lose her life.
Right.
And as Jackie said, this is not to gloat or to say, well, look at this. No, she lost her life, and she didn't deserve to. But at the same time, where you couldn't get the mayor to step down when it came to Philando Castile.
Oh, the police chief, yeah.
Right, or the police chief.
Right.
You couldn't get all of this traction when it came to Philando Castile. No, it was like, well, you know, the jury spoke and, you know, had their day in court. It's always this stuff with the cut and dry stuff with us.
Right.
When it comes to the criminal justice system, black folks, because we know, you know, you can, you know, I mean, people can say what they want, but every time one of these things come up, we already know that nobody's going to do time for killing black people.
That's right.
We already know.
Exactly.
So when this thing happened with what's her name,
Justine Damon.
When Justine Damon happened, this tragic thing happened, I knew that the mountains was going to move. Not only because she was Caucasian, but she was from Australia.
Right.
So I knew the mountains was going to move.
Exactly. And on top of that, when we found out that the police officer who murdered her, because she was murdered, when we found out that the police officer who murdered her was not only black, but an immigrant. Let me tell you how much of an issue race is in this case. The attorney that... Oh, okay. We have a call. Yay! Blog Talk Radio is working. Woo! I don't know how it's going to come through, but we'll see in a couple of minutes. Let me read this to you really quick. I'm going to see if I can get it on screen capture for you. This is quite interesting. Yeah, okay, here we go. So this is the attorney that was hired for Justine Damon's family. Now, don't ask me why she needs an attorney. I don't know. I'm just telling you what is being said here. The attorney said it's quite clearly an improper use of deadly force on someone who it is impossible for me to conceive of as a threat to anyone. Bennett told the Star Tribune Thursday. Bennett is the attorney's name. I mean, she saved ducklings out of the sewer, for God's sakes. Previously, this attorney said that Justine Damon is the most innocent victim of a police shooting that he has ever seen. This guy's name is Robert Bennett. And he went on to say, and this is really what's disturbing about this, Robert Bennett is not a stranger to previous police shootings of unarmed people in Minneapolis, because he worked with the family of Philando Castile.
Wow.
He helped them get a settlement, the $3 million settlement,
right.
the bullshit $3 million settlement that was paid to. He was the attorney that represented Philando Castile's family. And this man says that the nice white lady from Australia was the most innocent victim of police shootings he has ever seen.
Wow.
Because she is someone that saved ducklings, and that for him, it was impossible for him to conceive of her being a threat to anyone. It wasn't impossible for him to conceive of Philando Castile, whose family he just represented in a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis. But he thinks that, let me make it plain and clear for those of you who don't know why Jackie's spazzing out again. The idea that black people are dangerous, that we are aggressive, that we are criminal all of the time, that we are always up to no good, that we are monsters. Remember the way Darren Wilson described Mike Brown in that court testimony? He was a monster. Yeah. He was like Godzilla. The criminalization, the criminalization and the animalization of the black body.
And let's call it the dehumanization.
The dehumanization.
That is what it's all about.
That is a part of the system of white supremacy. That isn't just a recent thing. We're talking about from the beginnings of this country and before then, making black people less than human so that we could be enslaved, so that our enslavers and oppressors could feel okay. I mean, why would you care about enslaving people who you don't even think of as people?
Right. Well, look, I want to get to this
call. Yeah, so we do have a call.
Right, we only got 14 minutes. Let me see if I'm doing this right now. Hello, caller, are you there? Let me see.
Let's see.
Hello, caller, are you there? Did I lose the caller?
Uh-oh.
Caller, look, please call back if you listening to this. Yeah, I think I did lose the caller.
Did you throw him away?
Yeah.
Wait, let's see.
Hold on. I think I got him back.
Let's see. I'm gonna come over here and take a peek. Oh, okay.
Is he? Hello? Hello, caller? Okay, it's on me. Hello, caller?
And now our callers are being shy. Again, we had this problem before, where people would call in and then they'd be kind of shy, and we've got that aggressive body language going on even over the phone, apparently. So.
Well, I mean, if you the shy caller, if you want to call back, please call back. And again, let me give that number while we have the remainder of the show. We want to move on to the Michael Vick and Colin Kaepernick issue.
Yeah. So what's the call-in number?
929-477-3060.
Cool. 929-477-3060.
So we got 13 minutes left on the stream, and so we're going to move on.
We're going to try to.
We're going to try to move on. At least Blog Talk will cut us off.
Yeah, we'll still be hanging out with y'all with y'all.
Right.
But just to wrap up this whole the story, which we know has not concluded. Trust and believe. The police chief has stepped down. I mean, Philando Castile was just murdered not too long ago. I mean, and Philando Castile wasn't even the first unarmed black man who was shot, or unarmed person of color who was shot in Minneapolis. They have a problem with this. This is an issue with the Minneapolis PD. Anytime you hear about an unarmed black person or an unarmed Latino or an unarmed Native American being assaulted, abused, or shot or murdered by the police, trust me, it's not the first time.
And now I'm gonna address this. Kathleen, thank you for bringing this question up. Okay, how do you fix it? Because everybody want to know. Okay, we're tired of going over and over the issue as if 400 years of oppression and stuff, and we talk about it for an hour. That's enough. But the thing of it is how do we deal? How do we overcome it? And we've been talking about how to overcome it. The problem of it is people don't want to hear it. We've been talking about how to deal with this, how to overcome this. We've talked about, even when we spoke about in progressivism and the progressive movement, we spoke about what we as progressives need to do. We're going through this crap now because of what I call the movement killers that want to come around and distract us from what the real issues are.
Right.
And then what happens is, they pick up their marbles and run, and then leave us fighting over what's left. And so the thing of it is that we spoke about, and we're going to continue to talk about, what are the solutions to this? Because there are solutions to this.
Right.
One of the solutions is what we're doing now. Educating people. Educating people on what the hell is going on.
Exactly.
And the reason why, why we feel the way that we feel. And the reason why things are the way that they are. This is one of the reasons why how we can deal with this. But we've been talking about solutions for a while. The fact of it is they don't want to hear our solutions.
Right. And listen, as far as policy, yeah, when you start having these conversations with your friends, don't count on us. Look, there are not that many of us, so you can't tag us in every conversation. Y'all not gonna drive us crazy. We can't have all these conversations for you. So that's why we ask you to share these videos. And when you're having these conversations with your friends and with your family, then you give them the facts that you have. But as far as pushing for policy is concerned, investigate the police unions. Get a contract. Make the contracts, demand that the contracts that police unions negotiate for police officers be made public. We deserve to know what the employment policies are, especially in regard to discipline and dealing with these kinds of issues are in regard to the people who our tax dollars pay their salaries. So we don't know what's in these contracts and agreements that these police unions negotiate for with these police officers. We don't know what the disciplinary policies are for the police departments that protect and serve where we live. We need to know these things. And then someone mentioned, and it just slipped my mind, but we need to find out what citizen actions can be taken, what citizen review boards, or what role citizens can play in meeting with your local law enforcement office. Talk to the people who protect and serve you. And if you don't get the answers you like, I don't expect you to get these answers from your patrolmen and your patrol women and your patrol women. I don't expect you to get answers from them. That's why you call the lieutenant. Call the chief of police. Just like we're doing these phone banks for politicians and calling their offices and blowing up their phones, do the same thing for the chief of police. You pay their salary. You have a right to know. That's an easy fix. That's an easy action right there. So so that was a great question, Kathleen, and Abdus was right. Thank you. So yeah, with this thing with Miss Damon, trust and believe. The police officer will be prosecuted. He's not just going to be placed on admin leave.
No, he is on administrative leave.
Oh, he is on administrative. Well, you know that's not the end of it.
He's been indicted, but
he's already been indicted. Already, it hasn't even been. Has it been a week?
No, I don't think so.
It hasn't. How long did it take for Philando Castile's murderer to be indicted? I'm just saying.
Well, you know, and the thing of it is, what really bothers me is the fact that you had all of this video when it came to Philando
That's
Castile.
another thing.
And you still couldn't get a conviction.
Right.
And there still was this, you know, and this clinical, which some white folks kill me with this. This clinical analysis of when we have black men and women gunned down. This clinical analysis, like, okay, now we're going to study this. And we want to see if he's really at fault. What did he do when he was in 8th grade? You know, he stole cookies once. You know, he didn't live a pristine life.
Right. And he was no angel. Remember when they said that about Mike Brown?
Right. So, you know, and so what happens is the fact there's always this clinical analysis. But there was this emotional response when it comes to Janet Damon.
Janice Damon,
when the white guy out, I believe, in the West Coast, I think it was in California, and I mean, he was beaten savagely by the cops. Right. Very emotional response, and rightly so when it came to him, and you know, so but it always, when it comes to Alton Sterling and Eric Garner, it's always, well, let's see the tape.
What were they doing when they were getting their head beaten in by the cops?
When I reviewed the tape at 5:15, it looked like he kind of turned to the right. That could be interpreted as, you know, and it's this game we play when it comes to this. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but it's like, it's this game that we play. It's this constant fight to assert our humanity. You know, that man, you know, when Eric Garner died, he left a family behind.
Right.
That's not going to see him anymore. He meant something to that family. Philando Castile got murdered. He left a family behind. Alton Stewart left a family behind. Sandra Bland left a family behind. And you know, so this clinical analysis, as if other people are not going to be affected by it, it's crazy. But all you got to do is put a white face to it, and then the humanity comes back.
Right. Exactly.
She picked ducklings out the sewer, and you know, and all of this stuff. And I'm sure she was a wonderful woman. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that how we can go back and forth, and the media does play a role in that, because I don't see anybody going back in Damon's Facebook page to see if she ever held any guns up, and wore any gold grill,
gold
grill and all, and I'm sure she didn't do any of that. But what I'm saying is the fact that it's always got to be that if we're going to see black people as victims, then this white Christian morality has to come in, for the most part, that says that you have to fit this narrow definition or this narrow criterion of being such a good steward. You know, that we can't find no fault in order for us to even say, well, damn, that at least shouldn't have happened.
Right.
You know, we still, because I mean, let's look at it. Even with Jeff Sessions, which I wanted to bring up, is that even when he went to, I believe, Damon, when he addressed that situation, the first thing he said was, but I'm not going to really say anything negative about the police department, even though this shouldn't have happened. I'm not going to bash our brave souls in law enforcement. This is the insanity that we're getting from you know, and it's just crazy. It's like, you know, we all understand that the police are necessary. We're not anti-police, But when you have elements in your police force that shouldn't belong there, what we're saying is get rid of them.
Exactly.
If I drive my tractor trailer down 95 and I'm just running into people, I'm just, you know, I'm taking loads and I'm flipping on the interstate all the time, cause I'm sure my employer would be like, you know, you're just not good at this. You need to find another occupation, this and that and the other. But at the same time, it's like, you know, what we're saying is, what Black Lives Matter is saying, what all of us are saying is that if you have elements in the police department that should not belong there, don't send them somewhere else like the Vatican does and hope that they get hooked up by another police department. No, they shouldn't be a cop.
Exactly. And us calling that out is not us being anti-cop. Like you said, we're not anti-police.
No, of course not.
You know, if you are driving your rig down the highway and running over people, me calling your company and saying, would you get him off the street, please? I'm not anti-trucks. I'm not anti the trucking company. I just want them to deal with you, the problem. So now that a nice white lady has been killed, and it's ridiculous that it had to happen, that a nice white lady had to be killed for white people to understand and come to the conclusion that there's a problem with law enforcement in this country. Can we deal with the problem of law enforcement that's gone wrong in this country? Can we do that now? Now that some of you, now that you realize that there's a problem, now that it's happening to you? Okay, cool, great. Let's go on to the next story. Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to say goodbye to our Blog Talk audience because they're leaving, but we're going to be around. Catch us at Coffee, Current Events, and Politics right now. Live stream will go on for about another 10 minutes while you can catch us on there, but we will be back on Blog Talk next week. Hopefully we get all the kinks knocked out and have this a little bit smoother.
Yeah, we will.
But just bear with us. And so anyway, if you want to continue the show, join us on Facebook, Coffee, Current Events, and Politics, as we still are in the process of doing a live stream.
Yep. So, okay, so you mentioned a few minutes ago this narrow Judeo-Christian white conservative ideal of what acceptable is supposed to be, right? And how a lot of white people and even a lot of black people, if you're anywhere outside of that ideal, then they got problems with you, right?
Exactly.
Okay, here's a perfect example of that. I'm gonna try to get this screen capture for you guys so you can see this video. Let's see if I can get. There we go. Uh-oh, and I just realized you probably cannot hear that.
Clarified his
there we go.
This tweet. Colin Kaepernick's
Let's do that again.
Listen, I'm not up here to try to be politically correct, but even if he puts cornrows in it, I don't think he should represent himself, in that way in terms of, just the hairstyle. Just go clean cut. Why not? You're already dealing with a lot of controversy surrounding this issue.
This morning, Vick clarified his statement with this tweet. Colin Kaepernick's hair has nothing to do with him not being on an NFL roster right now. Let's be clear. I wish only the best for Colin. I stand by what I've said about him being signed at some point this season to help an NFL club. I think he is a great kid who has a bright future, and I'm looking forward to seeing him on the field again. Trust and believe what I said was not in malice. Hello, Rob Parker. Welcome, Rob.
What's happening? Good morning, everybody.
Shannon, let me start with you. Does Vick have a point?
No, he doesn't have a point. And what Michael Vick just did was continue to perpetuate the stereotype that blacks that look a certain way, dressed a certain way, should be judged a certain way.
Okay, I need to stop that right there because the whole thing is like 9 minutes long.
But you can tell when a black man got a serious point to make.
Yeah.
Because he's sitting there with his hands folded. And he's putting on his best deacon look. That stern deacon look that we used to see in church. Look, I'm not trying to make a joke here. I need this to be taken seriously.
What does
let me stop that. Oh my gosh, that was so funny. I dig Shannon Sharp, and for those of you who don't know, I'm a huge football fan. But I actually have not watched the NFL probably in what's it been, 2 years now.
Right.
And he should know because when we got married, when football season happened and we were like newlyweds, and he's like, I'm not getting dinner Sunday. I'm like, McDonald's is open? What? The game is on, But once I saw the way the league responded to Kaepernick, and not just the owners. Please understand what I'm saying. Not just I expected the owners to respond the way they did. I expected the fans to respond the way they did. I didn't like how the other players responded to that man.
Right.
Both black and white. I was pissed off that the players didn't support. So I just said, you know what? I know that my viewership doesn't lose them any money, but I can't watch these people anymore because I understand that this is just a game, but what Colin Kaepernick took that knee for all those times, that was about life for us. That was about literally life and death for us. So for Michael Vick, for those of you who don't know who Michael Vick is, I suggest you look him up because it would take too long to explain. But here's this brother who had his own serious problems with the law as a football player, celebrated NFL football. He was one of my favorite quarterbacks. Had serious problems with the law, went to prison for those problems, came out of prison, and he was just excoriated. He was excoriated, just dragged, raked over the coals by mostly white NFL fans. They protested him in Atlanta when he tried to come back to the Falcons. They protested everywhere he played when he finally got back into the NFL. They protested. I mean, people protested this man. But the Philadelphia Eagles gave him a chance. Philadelphia Eagles, but I know you wish they hadn't. But
I mean,
it was terrible.
But I think he wasn't terrible because he couldn't play.
Right.
The whole thing with the whole stuff with the dogs issue and stuff, and people not letting him live that down. I mean, really hurt his performance. I mean, first of all, the man went to prison.
Right.
And how many years did he do?
What, 5?
Yeah, about 5
5
years.
or 6 or something.
In an athlete's life.
It wasn't that long, but.
Well, but I mean, whether it's a couple of years in an athlete's life, man, it's hard to get back in the game.
It is.
It's hard to really expect someone to have that kind of top performance when they've been taken away like that.
Right.
And then and no matter what he did to try to satisfy his detractors and his critics, it was never accepted by him.
Right. And that's the key. I encourage you to watch the rest of that Shannon Sharp clip. Of course, we're going to post it because Shannon makes some excellent points. Here Michael Vick is, who has been through the ringer with, an unforgiving, mostly white fan base. I mean, absolutely. That man, yes, he committed a crime. It was a horrible crime. He committed a crime, and he served his time for it. And a lot of black football fans were like, okay, fine. He committed a crime. He served his time. Now let that man earn a living.
Right.
We're not saying that he shouldn't have been punished for what he did. He financed the dogfighting ring. Horrible, horrible thing. But we were just saying, okay, he served his debt to society. Let that man live his life now. And under the tutelage...
And then we act like he's the only one that ever did that.
Right,
I mean, this is the hypocrisy that we have in this country, is that we'll single out Vick. And the only reason why we're doing that is because he's some celebrity or something like that.
Right.
But I mean, we single him out for dog fighting and all this other kind of stuff and everything. And yet we ignore the athletes who beat their wives, and,
right?
Who go out here and abuse women, or and all this other kind of stuff, or celebrities. Like, why we're not demanding that that France extradite the director that's accused.
Oh, Roman Polanski.
Yeah. Why we not enraged about that?
Roman pedophile Polanski.
Right. So what I'm saying is that okay, yeah, I love dogs. I mean, I love the dog that I have. But after a while, it's like, man, let it go. I mean, the man went to prison. He lost a lot of income, potential income. I mean, come on, when is enough is enough. And then the thing of it is that I know for me, that if I was to, if somebody was to take what I've done in my life, the wrong things I've done in my life, and persecute me for that, I mean, come on, man. It's, again, like, who's without sin?
Right.
You know what I mean? So
exactly. But the interesting thing about Mike Vick's comments, that Shannon Sharp was talking about was Mike Vick has been on the receiving end of the unforgiving, very narrow kind of what do you want to call it, hon? This myopia. This myopic view of what an acceptable person is supposed to be, an acceptable black person. Because you notice when Michael Vick went into prison, you know, he had cornrows, he wore the gold, like you said, wore the gold chains. You know, that was Atlanta culture. That wasn't anything. That was just a kid straight out of college. He was a kid straight out of college with a whole lot of money. Who, you know. But
that white, see, that's the thing. They blame him for the bling and stuff, but there's the white folks that sold him the bling.
Exactly.
You know, it's the jewelry stores, it's the jewelry guy, pardon me, that's sending their people to these rich young black kids and say, man, if you want to really be something, you need to buy it.
Right.
They buy it and then they criticize them for
right.
You know, so.
But then under Tony Dungy's tutelage, Tony Dungy was the coach for the Indianapolis Colts. Tony Dungy told Michael Vick that he needed to change his image. He needed to clean himself up so that he could be more presentable. That's what Mike Vick said about Colin Kaepernick. He needs to he needs to cut his hair and be more presentable. Even though Mike Vick knows doggone well that the reason Kaepernick isn't playing has nothing to do with how that man looks.
Of course it's not.
He knows that, but he's been brainwashed to believe that the only way white America is going to accept you is if you look a certain way. But even Mike Vick knows that's not true, because he was still treated like garbage by these unforgiving white NFL fans and even people who weren't NFL fans. When he shaved his hair, when he cleaned his image up, when he stepped out of his house in a shirt and tie every day. I mean, when the judge told him, do you know that Michael Vick is legally barred from ever owning a dog? His children can't ever have a pet. Not a dog. Because a judge handed down that sentence. But here Michael Vick is, knowing damn well that it doesn't matter how you clean up physically. If white people in this country, I'm sorry, if some white people in this country believe that you have violated their standards, there is no cleaning up you can do. You will always be their whipping boy, but still.
But see, the problem of it is that those people who have that, and this is the problem with the NFL and all these other organizations, is the fact that they cater to that voice, you know, as an institution, where instead of taking the side and say, well, you know, Michael Vick served his time, he did this, he did that. It was the same thing with the Ray Rice thing.
Right,
you know
right.
What I mean? It's like, okay, well, we got a quarterback in Pittsburgh that's abusing women and stuff like that, and all those other kind of disparities. But what happens is that it's okay to throw black people under the bus and distance yourself. You know, the whole thing about the Kaepernick thing is how Michael Vick, and let me ask you a question. When has white folks cared about what Michael Vick had to say? I mean, I'm asking
never.
the question because
never before now.
Well, but this is my point. My point was he was a pariah,
right,
in this whole field, and now all of a sudden now, and it goes back to how we're pitted against one another.
Exactly.
So now all of a sudden now, I know, and we did this on the show when we talked about how Fox News have all of these black conservatives behind glass, and they break them out when they have to chastise other black people.
That's exactly
so
what
it goes back to the roots of slavery, when you had the plantation owner set up fights between black men on their plantations, and they fought to the death, or they fought until somebody was maimed. But it was for their entertainment.
Exactly.
And usually the ones who were fighting, one of them was beloved by the master. You know, he was the one getting the meals, kept fat and stuff, because he was the one that was going around making money for the master, fighting the other slaves. You know what I mean? And if they wanted a particular slave to be humble, someone that asserted themselves,
right,
then they get Big Jim.
Exactly.
Because Big Jim ain't nothing but a brute anyway. They made him into a brute. So
Yep.
they get Big Jim and tell Big Jim, go over there and kick his ass and make him realize who's really in charge.
That's right.
And Big Jim will come over there. So what I'm saying is that when we talk about the roots of these things, we realize that here it is, and Kaepernick had a smart answer for it when he said that, Michael Vick is suffering Stockholm Syndrome.
Yep.
Michael Vick looked at this, at least on camera, even though he's a much smarter man than that. This is my chance to atone.
Come on now, that's it.
To
Yes.
white critics.
That's
This
it.
is my chance to atone.
That you better preach.
Well, I mean, I get it right sometimes.
You better preach over there
I
with
get
your
it right
sexy
sometimes.
self. Oh, I mean, some of us have been, and here's how the Stockholm Syndrome thing works. You can't get someone who you have not made a captive, who you have not terrorized, and who you have not beaten down to be your spokesperson for you, not as the oppressor. You can't get somebody who hasn't been broken by the system to like we say, cape for the system, put on the cape and be the hero,
right.
and run in and save the day. That's what, and I'm not gonna call Michael Vick names because I recognize that's why we're having this discussion. I recognize that even Michael Vick doesn't fully understand beyond what you just said. Michael Vick is just like, this is my chance to show people that I'm really not a bad guy.
Right, yeah,
that I really just made a horrible mistake in my youth, and that I'm really not. This is my chance to redeem myself.
Yep.
He doesn't even understand that he did that at the expense of throwing a black man under the bus who took a stand for the rights of voiceless, powerless, unarmed black people.
A black man who supported him.
A black man who supported, come on.
Who supported him when he was going through his stuff.
Man, I mean, you talked about the slave fights. Well, what about, this also harkens back to one of the tactics many plantation owners used, and it wasn't only plantation owners, because King Leopold had a ginormous plantation in the Congo.
Yeah, it was called the Congo.
It was called the Congo.
That was his plantation.
The Free State of Congo
right.
was King Leopold of Belgium's entire plantation. One of the things plantation owners, slave owners would do was to get a slave to punish other slaves, and that served two purposes. It served to break the will further of the slave who had to do the punishing. Because if the slave who did the punishing didn't do the punishing, trust and believe their punishment was going to be worse.
Right.
So you've got this, and at some point, just like every situation where human beings are captives, you have people who, like in the
collaborate with the system.
Collaborators, thank you, because
yeah.
I talk so much, my words run away sometimes. Who are collaborators, but nobody's born a collaborator. Nobody who is captive wakes up one. It's like, okay, you kidnapped me today.
Right.
But I sign up to be a collaborator. No,
right.
Collaborators are shaped. Collaborators are groomed. And in a lot of cases, collaborators are tortured to that point.
Right.
So Vick is being an unwitting collaborator with the system that tells black people, your little protest is fine and good. He even acknowledged, but you have to watch the rest of the video to see how he says it. He says it in a way that is so dismissive. I get what he's saying. I get what Kaepernick is doing, and I understand it and everything. But really, he needs to cut his hair.
But isn't that the way we handle subject matter in this country? We always want to reduce it down to its lowest form.
Yes.
We don't want to deal with the complexities of what Kaepernick is trying to say. We don't want to deal with the complexities of what we even talk about. but we always want to reduce it down to its lowest form. So now it's about, oh well, if he cut his hair and become clean cut. And Kaepernick knows that he could look like Wally Cleaver. And it ain't, and it's not about that.
Right.
It's about the fact of black descent.
Exactly.
And we talk, and look, you know, it's funny because when we spoke about how the other NFL players came out, now he had a lot of support in the NFL amongst players too.
Yeah.
But those who didn't support him, there wasn't anyone, including Kaepernick, who said that they didn't have a right to disagree with him.
Exactly.
But then when it came to the point of him not standing for the flag, taking the knee, and speaking out on certain subjects, it was all of a sudden now it was like, well, you're just a football player. We don't need to hear from you. And this and that and the other. So what I'm saying is, again, the common denominator with Kaepernick, the common denominator with Black Lives Matter, the common denominator with a lot of these things is black descent.
Exactly.
Black people are supposed to be happy with their lot in this country. It's the best you're going to do. Yeah, we'll throw you a few crumbs here and there. But, you know, we'll make, you know, but basically, you're supposed to just keep your mouth quiet and move along.
Right.
You know, you're not supposed to agitate for nothing. And this is the way so many of us have been groomed, which is the reason why we allowed Obama to have 8 years being president, and we refuse as a group to have an agenda to present to him.
Exactly.
Because first of all, we know, like I heard one black lady say on the radio one time when they asked about Obama putting forth an agenda for Black America, she said, "Oh my God, he can't do that. The white folks will kill him."
And people really had that fear.
People really believed that.
People really had that fear. I think we talked about that a couple of times.
Exactly.
You know, I'm looking at the comments real quick. Okay, let me make it really, really clear. The issue with this conversation with Michael Vick and Colin Kaepernick is not that Michael Vick had anything to do with a dogfighting ring. Like we have always said, and I mean, man, we have a dog. We love dogs. We love animals. We're not excusing what Michael Vick did. What he did, though, is not the point of this discussion. The point of this discussion is that Michael Vick was found guilty of his crimes. He served time for his crime. He was continually, and to this day, he is excoriated for a crime he served his time for. Regardless of how clean shaven he is, regardless of how physically presentable he is, and he's given this advice to Colin Kaepernick when Michael Vick himself is still referred to as a dog killer by a lot of white people in this country.
But the heat was off of him.
But the heat wasn't on him. See, Michael Vick isn't competing for anything. He's not competing for a job. He's not trying to, you know, he's not looking for anybody to sign him. He's not looking for a sportscasting job. He's just,
he ain't gonna get none of that.
Because he's not gonna get any of that anyway. His time is done.
Yep.
You know, he is relaying the message of respectability politics and the respectability doctrine that was relayed to him, that even he knows doesn't work. Because as physically presentable as he is, you saw him, clean shaven guy sitting there in a nice pressed shirt, people still call him a dog killer. So what is the point of this man who is still being identified as a dog killer telling another black man who has not committed a crime, who hasn't been arrested ever, who what he was doing, the reason he doesn't have a job in the NFL today is because he stood up for the rights of black people. That is the reason Colin Kaepernick has not been signed. Not because he sucks that bad as a quarterback. Ryan Leaf was signed for a couple of seasons, and he actually did suck. Quarterbacks with much worse records have lasted much longer than Colin Kaepernick has. So, look, that whole he's not being signed because he's not a good player, that's a lie.
Well, remember one thing, that there are times when great men rise to an occasion. There's another time when occasions make great men. You know what I mean? Colin Kaepernick was made. I mean, and what I'm saying is that when Colin Kaepernick started exercise his freedom of speech rights. I mean, this was when there was a plethora of black unarmed people being murdered by the police.
Right.
You know, I mean, let that sink in. I mean, let it sink in. That this was a time, man, when we was back to back to back to back with black bodies dropping in the streets, with videos film of being streamed all over social media of one black man, black women being beaten on interstate highways by police, and having white civilians come in not to help her, but to help the cop who was on top of her beating her down. You know, Sandra Bland, exercising her freedom of speech, whether you disagree with the way she treated the cop or not, she didn't come out of it alive.
Nope.
You know, talking about a man who called the cops in Chicago on his bipolar son, only to have the son and the neighbor murdered by police. Only to have Laquan McDonald, who apparently suffering from mental issues, be gunned down like a dog. 16 shots.
And a cover-up.
So the thing of it is, man, is that when we talk about Colin Kaepernick, he was made. And what was he made by? The racist attitude that was permeating through the police forces of this country. The fact that Black Lives Matter was made. Black Lives Matter was created by the situations that forced black people to say, you know what, we have to declare this to the world, that Black Lives Matter. These things don't come out of a vacuum. But now we want to make it an issue about Kaepernick's dissent. We want to make it about Black Lives Matter dissent, but it all goes back to that it was the events that created Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
It was the events that created a Colin Kaepernick. It was these events that happened that somebody, I mean, people in privileged positions like Colin Kaepernick, who could have just ignored it, kept his head down, and chased the wealth, but who decided, unlike most of us, that he had to stand on principle. Hell be damned.
Yep.
So, I mean, so this is the thing. I mean, we can go on and on and on. I'm going to do the album. I mean, man, look, the list is too long to name. But the thing of it is that these are the things that created the dissent in this country, which also led to the deaths, unfortunately, of law enforcement officers down in Dallas and down in Louisiana and stuff. So, so we have to talk about these things, because just like any other virus, it kills the body if left untreated. And the body politic of the United States, as we've seen, is already dying, you know, with the Trump administration and everything that's going around. But the body politic of the United States, man, is going to die if we don't deal with this.
Yep. And you know, the idea, again, going back to the beginning of the show, the idea that we can talk about these issues in this a-racial vacuum. We can't. These are not just isolated incidences that are horrendous and are unconscionable. They're not unrelated.
They're not.
They all have the strain of American, particularly uniquely American racism running through them. And in the last 4 minutes, when you think of the anti-BDS bill that we talked about, that even has strains of American-style racism running through it. If you're old enough to remember how we initially responded to apartheid in South Africa, you remember that we pretty much didn't care. We didn't. Our government didn't care. The people in this country didn't care. We pretty much said, oh, it sucks. So too bad, so sad, too bad to be you over there, you poor South African black people. But pressure had to be put on our government from a lot of forces outside of this country and eventually inside of this country to open the eyes of, first, it was everyday folks like you and me, to the suffering and the abuses and the oppression and the violence against black South Africans that was going on there. And then we, the people, put the pressure on the government to do something.
That's right.
That's how it works. That's why we talk about these issues. So now we have another BDS movement that is growing because of the situation in Israel against Palestine. And we're not concerned in Lukman Nation, being Christians especially, with how you personally feel about Israel. We understand that people have very strong feelings about that. Understand that we do not believe the idea that if you criticize the nation, the government, the nation state of Israel, that you are being anti-Semitic. That's not true. Because if I go out here and steal your car, if you tell me that what I did was wrong and you call the police on me, are you being a racist? Because you're telling me, Jackie, I know what you did was wrong? No, that's ridiculous. So when we talk about the state of Israel, the government of Israel, committing these abuses against the Palestinian people, that's not being anti-Semitic, but we know that some people will believe that. We can't do anything about that. That's fine, good and dandy. But what is going on in Israel against the Palestinian people today is nothing more than another form of apartheid. And the BDS movement, the boycott, divest, and sanction movement is growing internationally, and it's growing in the United States. And people are becoming more and more aware of the crimes of the Israeli government against the Palestinian people. Crimes against humanity. We don't use those terms lightly in Lukman Nation. This is not just an instance where some Israelis dislike Palestinians. No, we're talking about oppression. State-sanctioned oppression. And now our government, many of them Democrats, not the first time it's happened, have come out in support of this bill that would make supporting the BDS movement a felony. A felony. Now, the bill hasn't passed. We're going to keep an eye on it. But do you think if the people who were being oppressed in Israel were not the brown Palestinians?
Exactly.
Do you really think that our esteemed leaders would be trying to make it a felony to stand up for the rights of those people? There are 20 states in this country that want to criminalize protest. And that has happened as a result of all of the protests in the past couple of years that Black Lives Matter and related organizations and efforts, as well as protests against the Trump administration, have occurred. Do y'all really think that if black people were not sick and tired of being sick and tired, and have once again taken to the streets to demand our rights, and we have stood up and said, and you know what, while we're fighting for our rights, we're going to fight for the rights of the people in Palestine too. We're going to fight for our brothers and sisters in Palestine too, and we don't want our government continuing to support the oppressive apartheid government of Israel. Do you think if we weren't supportive of a BDS movement, do you think they would be coming up with a bill to make supporting a BDS movement a felony?
Isn't that crazy though?
Oh, we're out of time as usual.
Oh.
Just when the conversation gets good. But as always, you all, we thank you very much, and we honestly do thank you, especially for hanging in with us with the technical issues. We're always trying to expand and improve Lukman Nation. We're always trying new things, and this is definitely why we need your help. We have a Patreon account. Consider becoming a patron of Lukman Nation, a monthly patron. If you cannot do monthly patronage, that's great. If you'd like to give a one-time contribution to support Lukman Nation in one of our many upcoming efforts, we got a documentary that we are about to begin work on next month, to going up to Baltimore to take stills. If you'd like to make a one-time contribution to Lukman Nation to help us with any of the things that we're doing, there is a donate button on the YouTube channel. Please go to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Both Lukman Nation and Brick by Brick. And follow, like, and share. I think I said everything I'm supposed to say. Did I say everything I'm supposed to say?
Yeah, like and share.
Okay, yes.
They know the drill.
Okay, yes. Thank you all very much for joining us this week at Live in Lukman Nation, and apologies to Professor Jason Nichols. We will have him on another time to talk more about this Michael Vick situation, this Minneapolis situation, and honestly, whatever the heck he wants to talk about. So, thank you all very much for joining us this week, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.